We spoke last on true leadership and what vengeance will look like from Yahweh's bond, his firstborn, Yahusha, who is resurrected 2,000 years ago after being a lamb, a sacrificial lamb for his people who has gone astray. And these past 2,000 years, mankind, after that enormous act of righteousness, the enormous act of giving of himself, pouring himself out, even unto death, even being tortured to death, to show how wicked and despicable the ruler of this age has been for the past 6,000 years. He came and showed forth his ahaba for his people. His a people who have gone astray, like all of mankind have gone astray. If we would have kept in the word of Yahuwah, we would not have gone through all the immense suffering that this earth has seen. And so the earth reels to and fro in various earthquakes, in various tsunamis, in various volcanic ash eruptions. The earth goes to and fro in fires, unpredictable fires that we are seeing, and the coldness. And because the people have suffered so much, famines, conflicts that produce so much pain and so much death, Yahusha must return with overwhelming force to show forth like never before. It's going to be a time like never before. We are at the beginning of the birth pains. We have been at the birth pains. And so we see in the accounts, he had told us to watch and pray, that we may be counted worthy to stand before the bond of man, the Son of Man, so that we would overcome and endure until the end. In that overcoming and endurance is keeping in the word. And so with the 12 testimonies, the 12 testaments of the 12 patriarchs, beginning with Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Lui, and now Dawood, we must prepare for a rulership. And we understand that under Yahusha will be Dawood, David, who we call King David, ruler Dawood, who was acceptable. And if you read his accounts in 1st and 2nd Samuel, in 1st and 2nd Kings, how Dawood was a man after Ab Yahuwah's, who we call Father Yahuwah, but Ab is cleaner, Abba Yahuwah's heart, who fought many wars. And so Yahusha, who will be over Dawood, will come in the same manner that Dawood ruled. Dawood removed many enemies, those who were against Yahuwah. And so after Dawood's rulership, Ab Yahuwah said that you will not build this house of prayer for me. It will be your son. It was Shalomah, who we call Solomon. Solomon was a ruler. He was greatly ahabed by Yahuwah. But as ourselves, he made mistakes. And if we don't keep ourselves in the Torah, the word, the dabar of Yahuwah, we will fall astray. So we will begin in terms of what right rulership is. Right leadership begins with following the word of Yahuwah, as Yahusha did, and he accomplished in his lifetime, being 30 some odd years before he died for his people. Beginning in Devarim, Deuteronomy, the word. The word of Yahuwah is his directive, his instruction to his people. And we see that Yahusha existed in perfect union with Yahuwah, because not only did he call on Yahuwah, he didn't call on any other name. There was no other name that he called on in prayer. There was no other name that he came in. He came in the name of Yahuwah, and that's why his name was Yahusha. He came in his Abba's name. He came in his word. He observed all that was spoken by Yahuwah. And our first parents were told, do not eat, do not partake of knowledge, konosos. Knowledge has increased. Knowledge that does not produce perfect obedience to Yahuwah. We can be filled with knowledge, but knowledge without works, trust without works is dead. I don't use the word faith because faith is a name of a pagan deity. We see that Yahusha comes and he's called trustworthy and true. Our trust, our commitment is to the word of Yahuwah. And so we must continually read the word. And I will read the word beginning in Deuteronomy chapter 17, beginning in verse 17. It says about a ruler, right leadership, and he is not to increase wives for himself. And we see that Solomon did that. He was not supposed to do that. Had he kept himself in the word, he would not have done that. He would have seen that how he was progressing and having 700 wives and 300 concubines, it was against the word of Yahuwah. And he is not to increase wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor is he to greatly increase silver and gold for himself. So it says greatly silver and gold. So he is not to go after riches. We're going to read up to verse 20. Verse 18. And it shall be when he sits on the throne of his reign that he shall write for himself a copy of this Torah. What we find in Leviticus, what we find in Numbers, what we find in Deuteronomy that we're reading, and also Exodus and what we call Genesis, the beginning, and also those parts of the Torah, instructions, directives, in terms of Enoch. Enoch wrote about how the calendar is. Jubilees. Yashar. So that's 3 accounts of what happened in the beginning. Genesis, Jubilees, and Yashar. He was supposed to write all of this. And it shall be when he sits on the throne of his reign that he shall write for himself a copy of this Torah in a book, in a scroll, from the one before the priest, the Kahan, the Levites, what the Levites kept, because they were the priesthood, the Kahan of Yahuwah. And it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his high. So he's not to just have it sitting on a coffee table, as most do. So that he learns to revere Yahuwah, his Elohah, and guard all the words of this Torah and these laws, instructions, directives to do them. So that his heart is not lifted up. So he's not self-aggrandized. He doesn't perceive himself more than what he should. Being humble, meek, and teachable. Humble, meek, and teachable. We learn that in how Yahusha walked the earth. So that his heart is not lifted up above his brothers. So we see in a lot of rulerships in the past centuries that the rulership shows themselves in an arrogant way. They're lifted up and they are worshipped. And this is not so. Because even Yahusha, who's at the right hand of Yahuwah, the creator of all beings, the creator of all, he did not lift himself up even before his 12 disciples, his 12 shilikim that followed him. He taught them. He produced the word of Yahuwah to them. he expounded on the Torah. So let's start this again. So that his heart is not lifted up above his brothers. If he kept reading the Torah, he would be humble, meek, and teachable, and so as not to turn aside from the command, right or left, so that he prolongs his days in his reign, he and his children, in the midst of Yasha'al. So we see that he is not to increase wives. He is not to increase silver and gold. And he is not to set himself up above his brothers, above the people that he rules over. We're going to continue in chapter 18 of Deuteronomy, Devarim, beginning in verse 9. When you come into the land that Yahuwah your Allah is giving you, do not learn to do according to the abominations of those nations. And so when Shalomah had those many wives, his wives turned him aside. He didn't have Israelite wives, Yashar wives. He had wives of the many nations. And this is what they did to him. And we see what Yahuwah gives in this instruction of Deuteronomy 18, verse 10. Let no one be found among you who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire. They were sacrificing their children. Or one who practices divination. Or a user of magic. So anyone who talks about magic in a positive way, it says here in the scripture, we are not to use magic. You have to think twice about that person and where they're turning you aside from Yahuwah. Yahuwah does not use magic or divination or one who interprets omens or a sorcerer or one who conjures spells or a medium or a spiritist or one who calls upon the dead. For whoever does these is an abomination to Yahuwah. And so we see in Shalomah's his life, that his wives turned him aside from worshiping the Most High. And this was forewarned. They were told in a very calm way in the scripture not to do those things. A spiritist or one who calls up the dead, for whoever does these is an abomination to Yahuwah, and because of these abominations, Yahuwah, your Allah, drives them out from before you. Be perfect before Yahuwah, your Allah. For these nations whom you are possessing, do listen to those using magic and to diviners. But as for you, Yahuwah, your Allah, has not appointed such for you. Yahuwah, your Allah, shall raise up for you a prophet, a Nabi, like me from your midst, from your brothers. Listen to him. So he was saying that he was going to bring Yahusha. And Yahusha did come. This is what this verse is alluding to. Now, going down to verse 18 of chapter 18 of Deuteronomy, I shall raise up for them a prophet like you out of the midst of your brothers, a Nabi. A Nabi is cleaner. And I shall put my words in his mouth. So certainly Yahusha had the words of Yahuwah in his mouth. And he shall speak to them all that I command him. And it shall be, the man who does not listen to my words, that he speaks in my name, the name of Yahuwah, I require it of him. But the Nabi, the prophet, who presumes to speak a word in my name that I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other mighty ones, even that Nabi shall die. So if you're not speaking in the name of Yahuwah and you're still using the other false names that have been proven time in the past 5 years, you will die. And when you say in your heart, how do we know the word that Yahuwah has not spoken? When the prophet and Nabi speaks in the name of Yahuwah and the word is not or comes not, that is the word that Yahuwah has not spoken. The Nabi, the prophet, has spoken it presumptuously. Do not be afraid of him. So there are those who will come in other names. The names cannot be, the name of the Creator cannot be other than Yahuwah. This is what we're learning, and we have learned, and we have asked for forgiveness. We've been immersed in waters of high to be immersed in the name of Yahusha and Yahuwah. Now we're going to go to chapter 20 in verse 2. And it shall be when you draw near to the battle that the priest, Kahan, shall come and speak to the people and shall say to them, Hear, O Yashar'al, you are drawing near today to battle with your enemies. Do not let your heart be faint. Do not fear or tremble or be afraid before them. For Yahuwah Ya'alawah is he who goes with you. So in this battle of the last days, Yahuwah will go before us. He will bring his messengers before us to help us, to fight for you against your enemies, to rescue you. And this was the other Torah in chapter 20, verse 8. And the officers shall speak further to the people and say, Who is the man who is afraid and tender of heart? Let him go and return to his house, lest the heart of his brothers faint like his heart. We cannot be faint-hearted in these last days because of the things that we're seeing. I'm going to give you something from a news that I heard. There's a lot of contentions around the world regarding a certain leader. And there was one, I don't know this man, whether he's a congressman or whether he is a senator, but I was going through the news in a couple of days ago, actually yesterday, and the man said against the leader of the nation, he said, there will be burning of much sage every day. Now, do you think that that was appropriate? Burning of sage is aligned with witchcraft. We do not say we're going to go against any leader by burning of sage. We are to be trustful and mindful and read the word of Yahuwah in terms of what he will do with our enemies. Those who go against Yahuwah, we have to be not faint-hearted because many matters will pass in these convulsions of the world, around the world, not only in one place. And we understand that there is a place of safety for his people. And those who doubt, those who are not in a line with Yahuwah, they will have to suffer through what the wicked one has deceived all of us. He's a deceiver. We've all been deceived. So it's time for us to align ourselves in the word. And we saw in my last post how Yahusha will come through with fire proceeding from his mouth to avenge all his enemies, those who fight against the word of Yahuwah. We who are his children must stay in his word, call upon his name, and do his works while there is time, because the night is coming when no man can work, no man can warn, no man can encourage others to read the word for themselves, to see that Yahuwah is true, his bond is true, and all that he said will come to pass according to his purpose and his directives of his word. Hallelujah. Yahuwah.